So what I want to do this morning as we consider 1 Corinthians 5, I want to answer three questions. And the first is, what's the issue? And the second question is, what's the issue behind the issue? And then thirdly, what does Jesus want? Well, first the issue. The issue in this chapter is porneia. Porneia. Porneia in the Corinthian church. Literally, verse 1 says, porneia is actually reported among you, and a kind of porneia which is not among the nations. So porneia, as you can just hear, is related to our English word pornography. And porneia is a general term which describes sexual intimacy outside the parameters of Genesis chapter 2, verse 24. Verse 1 says there's porneia of a kind that does not even exist among pagans. And then Paul says, a man has his father's wife, that is his stepmother. This is incest. And that's where we get to the issue behind the issue. The issue behind it. And the issue behind the issue is this: tolerance for worldliness in the embassy of Christ. Tolerance for worldliness in the embassy of Christ. Do you notice here, if you look at these verses in chapter 5, Paul had only one verse to say about this man, but 12 verses to say about the congregation. In other words, this man's blatant sin has exposed a latent dysfunction in the church. And what was the problem? What was the dysfunction? It was a problem of pride. Verse 2. And you are arrogant. And pride produces worldly tolerance in the embassy of Christ. Again, we're not talking about a one-night stand. We're not even talking about ongoing sin from someone, quietly, anonymously sitting in the crowd. We're talking about a prominent person who claims to be a Christian, all while brazenly living in a manner that embarrasses Christ and his church. The only ones who aren't embarrassed is the church. The culture's embarrassed. Not even the culture does this. But the congregation is enabling this man's behavior by their failure to speak truth to power. And as a result, the church is no different than the world. And so this is a lesson for us, don't you think? How is my pride producing tolerance for worldliness? This chapter confronts our consumerist culture. And here's what I mean. The idea of loving a brother or sister in Christ to the extent that you would graciously, tearfully challenge open, ongoing worldliness. Well, in our country with our freedoms, that person would likely just march right down the street to another church. And that's an example of how our culture of arrogant individuality has poisoned the church. Sin's primary roommate is pride. And pride always happens before the fall. And Paul's point is that where sin can live unhindered, the church remains a social gathering, but not a community empowered by Jesus. And this takes us to the big idea, what Jesus wants from us. And I'll just put it this way. Here's what Jesus wants. The lamb was slain, now live clean. Lamb slain, live clean. That's Paul's point in verses 6 through 8. This is who you are. And how did you become who you are? By Christ's sacrifice. Christ, the lamb, has been slain. He's cleansed us. Now live clean lives. Let's live like the people Christ says we are. Listen to me. Without Jesus, we cannot be the church. With Jesus, we must not be anything else.